Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. Each year, American farmers ship about 80 million tons of grain on the inland waterway. It's a system that's vital to American success in the global markets. Recently, I had the chance to talk with Tracy Z, President and CEO of the Waterways Council, a trade association of those companies that move on the intercoastal waterway, and I asked him, what's been the experience over the last 5 years for the industry?
Up and down, peaks and valleys is what we like to see. We've seen a lot of boom, we've seen a lot of slow times and difficult times with low water. Some very good examples recently of inland waterways and how critical they are to the supply chain. In the last 5 years, you had the Colonial Pipe security failure, where that pipeline, most of the gasoline for Nashville goes in via that pipeline. We saw a transition over to barge to make up for that time of closure. The most immediate one right now is the Port of Baltimore and the bridge collapse that's been on the news. Port of Baltimore is the #2 port and export coal. You're seeing that coal, in order to get out into the market, is going up to the Ohio and being shipped all the way down to New Orleans.
So we've found other alternative routes utilizing the inland waterways to keep that harbor operating, well, I suppose as efficiently as it can in this scenario.
As it can right now, absolutely. So they're finding additional ways to get it to market.
Now, harbors, or the Baltimore Harbor, does that fall under the inland waterway system? No, that's a totally
it doesn't.
separate.
That's coastal. So at WCI, we like to call it blue water, and the river is brown water.
Okay.
So it is not a part of brown water. So in WCI, we only do brown water.
All right. Well, one of the issues we've got, of course, up and down the river system are the locks and dams, Tracy. We've heard for years that this infrastructure is aging. It's well past time of replacement. How's replacement looking? How are we on that next generation of locks and dams for the waterway?
If I asked you the average age of all 213 locks on the system, what would you say?
I would say 65 years.
You're not bad. It's 80 years old. So the average age, which now when you look at that system and what's wrong, a lot of maintenance has been done. The Corps of Engineers has done a spectacular job at maintaining these facilities, but modernization is needed. You're not going to drive a 80-year-old car anymore. The system, though, is operating efficiently. You're seeing locks come online. You're seeing that the commodities are still getting to market. But the problem is these locks are designed for 50 years. And every year after 50, the risk of failure goes up exponentially. So if we want to keep competing in foreign markets, we're going to need to upgrade and modernize this system rapidly.
Are the droughts on the Mississippi and the impact that has on barge shipping, particularly in the fall and winter? I know the Corps has done a lot of work to keep that channel open down at the mouth of the Mississippi. What more can we do? What would your members like to see done, or how can we grapple with these issues?
You look at this year, I think you're going to have to look to expect another tough, difficult, just off the projections. So what we want at WCI and what the industry wants, right now the river's maintained to 9 feet in channel depth during low water. Most of the time during the year with the natural river conditions, it's much deeper. We would like to see during drought and low water that it's maintained at 12-foot draft. That way you can add the additional tonnage. You're not requiring more barges. And that way, we can continue somewhat of normal operations.
And how long until the Corps would respond to a request like that generally?
Well, it was authorized back in 1954, so we just need to provide them with the money and also the capability of actually maintaining and keeping up the river. And, do you go all the way to 12, do you not? So they seem very receptive to it. Congress is receptive to it. They're undergoing a new study just to make sure there's no complications with that authorization since it was 1954. A couple things have changed since 1954, but they would like to see it as well.
Thanks, Tracy, for that interview. And Tracy mentioned that conversation about funding will come up again during the Water Resources Development Act, probably up for debate this summer. Today's larger, heavier equipment can lead to more soil compaction issues. Firestone Ag IFVF tires with 82 technology maximize load capacity while minimizing soil compaction. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more. Now it's time to talk markets. Joining us this week is Dan Huber of the Huber Report. And Dan, we saw money move back into wheat this week. We saw money move back into soybeans. Are the commodities attractive again as an investment?
Well, it's picked up a little bit of interest. And again, the wheat was really the leader for the last couple of weeks. I think they've kind of turned the reins over to corn to a certain extent and beans. But beans, I think, really kind of had the stimulus from some issues in South America. Nothing really big on the demand side, but I think we're adjusting to maybe a slightly smaller world inventory than was anticipated 2 weeks ago, but not much more than that at this point. So.
Well, fill us in on what's happening down there in Brazil. What is the weather issue that could impact beans?
Well, of course, you're down to the last 10-15% of the beans yet to be harvested, but those are all in southern Brazil and just torrential rains. I mean, if you've probably seen some pictures in some of the major capital or major cities down in the Rio Grande do Sul area, but just massive flooding. So there, a lot of difficulty getting the rest of the crop out. Again, not a large portion of it, but I had read one analyst this week thought there could be 1 to 2 million metric tons reduction yet in that overall Brazilian bean crop. Now, granted, we do need to keep in perspective that this doesn't mean we have a shortage of beans by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I think the lowest estimates I've seen for total South American production are still 13-14 million metric tons above a year ago. So we have a lot of beans around, but still, prices had gotten pretty depressed, anticipating these big crops, so we've adjusted that a little bit upwards at this point.
That being said, have prices, particularly for new crop November beans, moved high enough, Dan, to get excited about locking in some sales?
Well, and again, it's certainly not what you would call big returns, but that said, interestingly enough, when we began this calendar year, November beans were at $12.50. They jumped below that right at the beginning of the year. We haven't quite made it back to that point yet, almost. We got close to $12.30, maybe not quite $12.40 this week. So at $12.50, I think then a person has to really start thinking pretty seriously about taking some protection on.
All right, Dan, the corn market. We've seen planting start to slow down across the Corn Belt amid moisture. When is the trade going to grow concerned about that?
Well, not that they haven't grown a little bit concerned, but same token, it's difficult to really get a market charged up about too much moisture, particularly when you're planting. And, we're a little bit off of pace at this point, but, not significantly. So, granted, when you put it in with good growing conditions like this, it's going to come up pretty quick. So it's hard to, when you see row crops out there, it's hard to get real excited. It
is, unless we can move more of them off our shores. Dan, export sales this past week, anything exciting to report happening there?
Not really. Pretty standard numbers up. Everything was a little bit of an improvement from last week, but very, very modest. So, pretty run-of-the-mill things right now.
As you look at the strength in the U.S. dollar, Dan, is that going to be a continued headwind here for grain exports?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the dollar has really kind of stagnated over the last couple of weeks and may even have seen a temporary top. I don't think you're ever going to see it completely collapse, but on the same token, it's not going to continue to be a roadblock, I think, at least in the next few weeks ahead.
All right, things to watch. We'll be back with more from Dan Huber of the Huber Report. Today's larger, heavier equipment can lead to more soil compaction issues. Firestone Ag IFVF tires with 82 technology maximize load capacity while minimizing soil compaction. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more. We're back talking markets with Dan Huber of the Huber Report. Dan, let's look at the cash market briefly for a minute here. What are you watching here in old crop corn as we get closer to summer? Any trends you're keeping an eye on?
Well, I mean, nothing dramatic stands out other than this is very much a domestic market. Exports, sales, and export movement has been consistent, but I mean, it's certainly nothing that's going to strike passion to some kind of a bull's heart. But it is interesting this year that the demand really seems to be a little more concentrated west of the Mississippi instead of east. Again, consistent here, particularly in the livestock sector. But to the west, I think the number of ethanol production facilities out there really keeps an above average demand. And a lot of the export business has shifted to the West Coast, specifically the Pacific Northwest. and problems in the Gulf, not just the Gulf, but problems in the Panama Canal with the load sizes and whatnot has really precipitated that. But what you found, though, is basis levels to the west, which are normally discounted to the east, have really been much stronger in relationship to that eastern corn belt than normal. So.
All right, Dan. Well, we know that they've been putting a lot of cattle on feed out there in the west. Let's talk about the cattle market right here. Looking at it at a distance, Dan, it just looks confused. How are you interpreting this thing?
Absolutely. And I think, on the bullish side of it, we still know the number of the inventory of cattle in this country is at historical lows. You're not going to change that any too fast. That said, still concerns about the economy, and then you throw in this whole question mark, and it's really question mark because nobody really knows how it plays out of the the bird flu, and so it just leaves us in a flux here at this point in time. And over the last month now, it's like the cattle market just can't decide if we're going to get up and go higher or move lower. So I'm afraid we have to kind of wait and see how that plays out. For people with cattle on feed, there are some, we should be at profitable levels. So, at a minimum, I think you'd want to lock in some kind of a floor underneath of your prices at this point in time.
Take that risk off the table while we're up here at least historic prices, even if they're not quite record any longer.
Right, exactly.
Dan, the other market we've seen a ton of volatility in over the past 12 months have been lean hogs. We saw incredible profitability, then incredible losses, then it back to triple digits. Now we're falling off. Where do we go?
And of course, we're following up a dramatically poor year for the hog industry as a whole. So, no, I think the picture still looks pretty bright. We're in a little bit of a correction mode here right at this point in time. I don't think it's going to get carried away to the downside, and I think as we move into the summer months, it might displace beef a little bit as the barbecue season comes upon us. So I think right now the picture looks pretty bright, at least into the summer months.
Export side on pork, are we seeing those numbers start to come back?
Really quite solid. I mean, week after week, we tend to still look at better numbers than last year. I think I did read this morning that the largest import market in the world, China, is actually down. Total meat imports around 5.5–6% for the year, and we know the pork imports have backed off some there. But of course, they're trying to do all they can to trim down their herd size for the glut of pork they have at this point in time.
Yeah, lots to watch around the world as we get closer to summer.
Always.
Dan Huber, thank you so much for joining us here this week.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Folks, let's take a look at those numbers from the World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates report. Traders were watching for an update in production numbers out of South America and for the first glimpse of potential U.S. production for this growing season. Globally, the USDA trimmed Argentinian corn production by 2 million metric tons, while trimming Brazil's production by nearly the same amount. For soybeans, the agency made no change to Argentina's expected production, while trimming Brazil's by 1 million metric tons. World ending stocks for corn did tighten last month, now down to 312 million metric tons, with global wheat carryout also shrinking by 4 million metric tons. Soybeans, however, bucked the trend and saw larger global ending stocks by about 8 million metric tons. Domestically, USDA assumes a trendline yield this early in the growing season, and they predict that will lead to a 14.9 billion bushel corn crop and a 4.5 billion bushel soybean crop. Those figures, plus minor changes in demand, left the U.S. corn carryout for next year at 2.102 billion bushels. Soy carryout was at 445 million bushels, and all wheat at 766.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead.
Well, let's take a look at that weather. Greg Solier is here, and Greg, Pacific Northwest, I know they had ample moisture, or at least some moisture up there last week. What's this week look like?
Yeah, really over the past 7 to 10 days, significant moisture, and some of that has, at least last week, translated east into Montana. Some spots picking up 1 to almost 3 inches of water equivalent. Yes, there was snow involved in areas of the Dakotas as well, but think of it as a moisture recharge for those spring rains. This week, it's a fairly quiet, zonal, fast-moving west to east upper air wind flow, so nothing of real excitement into the Pacific Northwest. Temperatures recovering to more seasonal norms outside of the patchy frost and freeze we saw in some of the inland areas and sections of the Intermountain West. Quiet weather as well, with a nice recovery on temperatures into the northern plains. A little patchy frost last week, northern valleys of California. That's over with as well. Ridge of high pressure beginning to show on up, and we will see with time this make a move slowly in the weeks to come into the nation's heartland. So yeah, we're winding down that active active weather pattern and anything but active across the Pacific Northwest. Quiet as you can expect, plenty of opportunity for outdoor work, high pressure across the Intermountain West, and the downslope flow keeps temperatures right at, if not a few degrees above average across the Dakotas. Opportunities to maybe resume spring grain planting there. A weak system across the desert Southwest to push some cooler weather down from the 90-degree readings into areas of the southern Sacramento and San Joaquin valleys. Gusty winds across New Mexico. A couple of showers and thunderstorms. Boy, quite a range, a dichotomy of drought conditions from just absolutely still tough western Kansas to wet as you get east of Topeka and Oklahoma City, where they were beat up, of course, last week with just 2 or 3 days in a row of severe weather. I think a locale in Oklahoma getting hit by a tornado twice within about a 10-day time frame. Hot weather in the desert Southwest, as you expect for this point in the springtime season. Warm, dry weather across much of the plains and actually in some areas of Nebraska and the southeastern plains. Mike, that weather dry time is much appreciated.
I know some farmers in the northern Corn Belt would like to see some dry time. Greg, you have any of that in the forecast?
Drier this week. We're winding down this very wet and active El Nino weather pattern. Hang in there. Bear with us here. We'll get through it just in the nick of time. A couple of weak systems, one here, one across parts of the Nebraska, wedge of some cool air. Nothing too exciting about this outbreak of scattered shower activity early to middle parts of the week. Lots of dry hours. General net effect will be dry time and maybe some opportunity away from some of the wetter areas of the Corn Belt to quicken the pace on planting operations. That system blows on through, slight cooling up towards the Sioux. Lots of high pressure from Montana across areas of the Ohio Valley. And yeah, there'll be opportunities for field work to ramp up a little bit, maybe a 2, 3, maybe 4-day window of opportunity for spring planting operations across the Midwest. Still can't get out of this severe weather mode into areas of the southern plains. Oklahoma City, Dallas, Fort Worth beat up last week. Points down to the east we go with showers and thunderstorms. Still heavy and severe hot weather in the southwestern part of the country, and the stormy pattern still lingers across the Delta region into the lower Mississippi Valley. Might quite a change from last year's ongoing dryness and drought in that part of the country.
It is indeed, Greg, but take us over to the East Coast. What do you see?
Looks like, again, some winding down to this active weather pattern. A couple of showers early and more likely in the middle parts of the week for the eastern and southern Corn Belt. Streams and rivers easing on down. Opportunities to get out there in the back 40 as well with high pressure into the northeast and New England. Dry time will be certainly widespread across much of the heartland. Late portion of the week, this weather system heads into the nation's midsection, out of the nation's midsection to the mid-Atlantic region with a couple of showers and thunderstorms there. Still an active weather pattern for parts of eastern Texas, Oklahoma, lower Mississippi Valley with warm, dry weather over the Carolinas. Welcome rainfall. Topsoil's drying through Florida. Gulf Coast area, scattered showers and thunderstorms late in the week. High pressure into the southern plains.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Pentair Hypro, a global leader in innovative spray technology for farmers for over 75 years.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Pork producers have seen prices rebound here in recent months as they've climbed back from their winter doldrums, but the industry as itself is still grappling with some ongoing concerns, notably issues that the consumer might encounter as they go to buy pork, particularly in California, which is implementing its Proposition 12 regulation, and potentially in Massachusetts, which has the Question 3 that could be coming into effect here shortly. Recently, I had the chance to talk with Lori Stevermer of the National Pork Producers Council about what that industry is doing over this summer to try and get some certainty for producers.
Well, there are a number of things being talked about. Really, we just want a federal solution, whatever that might be. Our farms are concerned about a patchwork of regulations. So California having one set of regulations, Massachusetts with their Question 3 having another set. We really can't afford to have 50 states and 50 regulations. So whatever that solution is, eliminating that patchwork is really what our producers are hoping for.
So that potentially could be coming in the Farm Bill. Of course, there's been a lot of inflation moving prices around in the country. Are there any issues like that that pork producers would like to see modified either for risk management protection or anything in that regard?
Well, the risk management programs have been important to our farmers, LMR, LGM, and so continued use of those programs and support would be important too. Like I said, especially after we've come through this really kind of rough stretch for producers, so continuing to have those tools available to help with that income and margin support would be very important.
Absolutely. It is always important to have that income. Lori, you mentioned you'd like to see a federal response to Proposition 12, the Question 3 out of Massachusetts, and of course politics follows the public. What have pork producers been saying to help educate the public on maybe why these issues are perhaps a bit misguided for putting to a vote?
Well, our producers have been really active both on state levels and national levels, talking to their legislators about how Prop 12 would affect their farms. So whether that's advocating on the Hill when we're out here for our fly-ins or just visiting with our legislators in our home states. It's also important to remember that Secretary Vilsack has also talked about the chaos that Prop 12 can cause. So he understands that patchwork of regulations isn't good for agriculture. So certainly having his voice speaking up for us, we hope will help with the overall solution.
Lori, if we've got listeners who want to keep up to speed with what the Pork Producers Council is watching throughout the year, where could they go for more information?
They can definitely go to our website at nppc.org. We've got tabs that have all of our key issues there. They can read up and certainly contact us if they have more questions.
Thank you, Lori, for that update. Folks, it's always a good idea to contact your legislators and let them know the issues that are impacting you on your operation. Well, Southwest Minnesota, certainly home to a lot of pork production, and recently it's become home to the new Fendt Lodge. This is a building put up by the Fendt company. It's their new brand headquarters here in the United States. I had the chance to talk with Nick Farsing, their director of marketing, about what farmers need to know about Fendt equipment.
Fendt produces equipment for professional farmers, and we are focused on being the most farmer-focused brand in the industry. That's our goal. And what that means is we're focused on solving farmers' challenges, making their farms more efficient, more productive, improving the agronomy, everything that ultimately leads to net farm income. And we're focused on making their lives easier as well.
As you think about making their lives easier, making farmers more efficient, what type of equipment does that lead Fendt to produce to get that done?
Yeah, so we have tractors, we sell combine, planter, sprayer, all the things that a big farmer in North America really needs to be successful. And we design those products to work together to do those things I just described, to uniquely solve those challenges that farmers have, to reduce input costs, improve their yields. And in an environment like we're in right now with tons of uncertainty around commodity prices, input prices, that's just even more so important.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, we do have volatile times with us right now in the world of agriculture. What to you makes Fendt special? Why should farmers looking to make those big investments check out Fendt?
Yeah, so I mentioned all those things that go into net farm income, but we're also really focused on de-risking the farm. So we have this thing called the Gold Star Customer Care Program, and what it's about is giving the farmer a peace of mind, taking some of those many risks off their plate. What it is it's a 3 to 5 year full factory warranty plus all service and maintenance during that time frame. So no deductible, no strings attached. I'm always asked, so what's the catch? There's no catch. No strings attached, everything but wear items included. So you know what you're paying. There's no machine down issues. And then on top of it, we offer a loaner guarantee. So if the machine does break, we'll have you up and running in 48 hours.
Keeping that uptime for farmers is so important
So
when
critical.
the costs are where they are. I've heard a phrase a lot around AGCO in particular, farmer focused, farmer first. What does that mean, Nick?
Yeah. So what it means is when we go on a farm, we don't talk about horsepower, hydraulic flow rates. What we talk to the farmer about is what challenges are they facing. What are the things that keep them up at night? And then we talk about how we can solve those problems. And sometimes it's with Fendt, sometimes it might not be. Sometimes it might be for another AGCO product, or maybe we just don't make sense at all. We're focused on solving the farmer's problems, not just talking about equipment.
Thanks, Nick. We do appreciate that update. And ladies and gentlemen, once we solve those problems on the farm, we're producing more grain. Well, the national sorghum producers are trying to find a solution for that. They recently took a trip to India, and they're working to teach more global buyers about U.S. product.
Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH. built by farmers.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Looking out at those corn and soybean fields, you might be thinking, well, we've got a long way before harvest and winter gets here, but it'll come. And when it does, you're going to need some propane on that farm. Joining me now is Mike Newland. He's the Director of Agriculture Business Development with the Propane Education and Research Council. And Mike, even though we're a long way from winter and harvest, it's still good to be thinking about your propane needs, isn't it?
It is. It's never too early to start thinking about it. And I know folks won't want to think about quite that topic just yet, but there's reasons to start planning and planning early. We start talking about early fills and contracting this time of year every year. The reason we do that is we are going to need propane in the fall, guaranteed. You're going to need some. And I think it's a great practice to have those conversations with your local supplier when there's no pressure on. You've got time to think about what maybe contracting looks like, what offers are available to you, and you're not on the way to the first cornfield and you've got to have propane today. I think there's a lot of benefit to doing early planning.
As you're doing the early planning, what needs to be on your mind? What should be top of mind before you make that call to your supplier?
Well, I think the first thing that everybody probably thinks about is, when did my corn go in the ground? What's the outlook for drying look like? Most places we are going to dry corn at some level, some moisture level. Some amount of your bushels will go through the dryer. So I don't know that it's critical that you just are waiting to see if you're going to need propane, because most folks do. So I think that's the first thing. Secondly, have the conversations with those folks. Make sure they're a business partner to you. You're having conversations back and forth. Don't make those decisions in a vacuum. Talk to your local supplier. They understand the markets. They can offer you sometimes incentives or various opportunities, and I think those are critical steps.
Mike, of course, a lot of that propane need on the farm at harvest is going to be for drying that grain. A lot of questions when it comes to getting that grain prepped and stored carefully. How can PERC help growers?
Well, a couple different ways. So there's a grain drying calculator on our website. If you're curious about how many gallons you may need, or from a projection standpoint, go to our website, propane.com. Search grain drying calculator. You can put in how many bushels of corn you're going to produce, how many points of moisture you plan on taking out of that crop. It'll give you a very rough estimate on how many gallons that you need, and that'd be a critical first step to have that conversation.
And you can call your supplier with that data, explain that I just ran this calculation, this is what I'm looking at, and get the process started.
Absolutely. I think that's a great first step.
Mike, one more time, what's the PERC website?
Propane.com is all things that are propane, and it's a great first step for anybody interested in researching anything that's propane.
Thanks, Mike. That's Mike Newland, the Director of Agriculture Business Development with PERC.
Greg Sodier is back now with his extended farm weather forecast for the nation.
In the first half of the program, Greg mentioned that there might be some dry down periods this next week, Greg, but there's still going to be rain. Who's going to see what and when?
Yeah, windows of opportunity, they're going to be expanding with time. And so while we do have, a half to maybe an inch worth of rain in some spots, this is generally what you'd expect for the time of year. But again, a lot of dry hours and dry days mixed in between. So that's the story here, with another outbreak or two of scattered to fair coverage showers and thunderstorms making their way into areas of the deep south and southeastern part of the country, up and down the eastern seaboard, probably about an inch close to it. Dry time back west of the Missouri, and scattered moisture for the western states. Most of the severe weather action for the Ohio Valley down to the Gulf Coast and points on to the east, and some rain too where we need it in through Florida.
Let's talk temperatures, Greg. What do you see the week of May 20th?
May 20th, here you go, in a pretty quiet weather picture, more or less a zonal flow west to east, a little bubble of high pressure up aloft here over the southeastern parts of the country, a little prod of some cool air through the Canadian Prairie and up towards the Sioux. Otherwise, temperatures about normal from the desert southwest across the Corn Belt locale, so soil readings should respond accordingly. Nothing out of control in the moisture department. Actually, maybe in some areas this would be welcome. Parts of Nebraska, Kansas, wet weather continues and is back into play over the deep south and southeastern part of the country. Much welcome and needed dry time with below average to normal moisture for the northern and eastern Corn Belt locales. All quiet across the southwestern reaches of the country, and moisture too for Big Sky Country and the Pacific Northwest, about normal.
Take us into the first few days of June. Greg, does that hot air start to expand?
It does. We're going to keep an eye on it. I think it's going to be one of these years where we move right from this more temperate setup and timely to maybe a little too much in the rainfall department, that the rains just kind of wind down and come to an end. That could be the summertime pattern around here. Matter of fact, we'll have greater detail on that coming up this Wednesday with Sarah Muirhead and yours truly on the feedstuffs365.com get-together podcast at about 1 in the afternoon Central Time. We will take a look at the rest of that summer outlook. In any event, normal temperatures for the Corn Belt, southeastern part of the country, a little above average. Here's that ridge over the northwestern part of the country. Nothing to get excited about. The moisture department, little wet weather into the Ohio Valley, eastern states. A look at the expanding area there, Mike, of dry time and below average moisture for the southern Canadian prairie, the plain states, back all the way to the Pacific coast.
The week of June 3rd to the 9th, Greg, how does that temperature outlook?
Yeah, we're going to boost soil temperatures up dramatically. Here comes the hot ridge. We think with time it's going to be making its way by mid to late June in this part of the country here. So the warmth is on the increase across the Corn Belt. Hot weather for the Plain States areas. Could be worsening some of the drought here in the High Plains areas. Fairly normal temperature pattern up and down the eastern seaboard. Some cool air for the northeast and New England. Looks like a warm weather pattern for the western states. Not much to write home in the moisture department except Pacific Northwest will take the moisture down through parts of Texas, dry in the southwestern reaches of the country, and much of the heartland, including the Corn Belt, Great Lakes region, will be dry.
Farm Progress Roundup is brought to you by Brandt Industries. Lead the field with Brandt's lineup of highly effective and efficient high-speed discs and land rollers. Visit brandt.ca for more. Well, it's hard to believe, but as summer gets closer, we're only about 3 months from the Farm Progress Show. For the Farm Progress Roundup this week, we're talking with Matt Youngman, the National Events Director. And Matt, how are things looking in Boone at the show site?
They are in as great a shape as we can ask for. We are really fortunate, as compared to 2022 when the corn wasn't even in the ground yet. We had all the corn in the ground by April 12th. It's up, looks great. Obviously getting quite a few rains here recently, but it's about everything we can ask for to be ready for field demonstrations at the end of August.
That is fantastic. It's coming closer and closer. Matt, for folks who will be coming to Boone for the Farm Progress Show, are there going to be some changes this year they ought to be aware of?
That's exactly right. We are excited to have a new route in from the north. The Iowa Department of Transportation put an overpass over the big rail line that runs along the north side of the show site. So we're now able to feed traffic in. Those folks coming from Minnesota or from northern Iowa, they're going to be able to get to the show, shoot across Highway 20 and down 17 and right into the show site and not have to get out on Highway 30 or go through Ames at all. So we're really excited to have a new third way into the show. It's gonna make things flow a lot more smoothly and a lot easier attended day for the visitors.
For folks coming from the south, Matt, do you expect this to make getting off Highway 30 a little bit easier as well?
Absolutely. Highway 30 has been the primary route for about everybody coming to the show. So if we take some of that traffic out of the mix, it's going to make that go more smoothly as well and give us other options if Mother Nature, or accidents happen, it gives us just a lot more flexibility on the inbound traffic route.
Always nice to have that kind of flexibility when we're dealing with this many people coming to an event. Matt, remind us, when does the Farm Progress Show kick off in Boone?
Yeah, everybody mark their calendars for August 27th, 28th, and 29th. That's the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday before Labor Day.
And if we were to log on to the website now, could we go ahead and get tickets, or is that not out quite yet?
That'll be June 1st. Looking forward to that. You'll be able to get, tickets at the gate will be $25, but you can buy them in advance for $15 plus fees. So a great way to speed your entry into the show and get it at a discount as well. That'll be up. That, golf carts, a lot of information starts populating on June 1st.
That'll be here before we know it. And then, of course, once Farm Progress Show wraps up, you head west to Grand Island, Nebraska for Husker Harvest Days. Matt, what's new at Husker this year?
A lot of exciting things at Husker Harvest Days this year. We're adding a bagging demonstration and all the regular field demonstrations everybody's been a part of, working on some really cool new autonomous demonstrations, as well as a short stature corn plot and a soybean plot. There's a lot going on there. Really excited about Husker Harvest Days this year. That is the most interactive show anywhere on the calendar, with all of the cattle stuff we have going, and alfalfa demos, corn demos. Just a lot going on throughout those 3 days.
And Matt, will this be the first time soybeans have been on the grounds there at Husker Harvest Days?
Yes, it is. We're really excited about that plot on the north side of Flag Road. Soybeans have never been grown there, and working with Pioneer, they're going to put in their best variety and really pour the coals to it and try to set some kind of yield records with those beans. So pretty excited about that project.
That's fantastic, folks. Husker Harvest Days, September 10th, 11th, and 12th. Matt Youngman, National Events Director with Farm Progress. Thanks so much for joining us this week.
Great to be with you, Mike. Thank you.
Leave it here. We'll have more This Week in Agribusiness when we come back.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, where we spotlight another great American farm tractor. If you're fortunate enough to have the build card for your antique tractor, oh, you get a wealth of information about that machine, to be sure. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Mystic Lubricants. Mystic Lubricants are made to make it last. Well, it isn't possible to get the build card for all of those antique tractors, but some that came out of Waterloo, for example, or Racine, you can get the build card and find out the exact date the tractor was made. Aaron Hindman at Oakland City, Indiana, knows what happened on the 10th of July, 1956. Look at this tractor he owns. It's a high crop, and that's the day that J.I. Case made that tractor. It comes with 4-ply front tires, 6-ply rear tires. Well, that's what it had when it came out of the plant. And Aaron even knows where that high crop tractor headed when it came out of Racine. It went to Stockton, California, where it would have been used there in, well, probably in vegetable crop production, I would imagine, in that region. Anyway, it made its way across the country again, and it made it to Oakland City, Indiana, where Aaron Hindman has all of the details on this tractor made in 1956. I think that was even before he was born, but it's at home these days in the southern part of the Hoosier State. Mark Stock is here with his weekly report from Big Iron Auctions. We welcome him in right now.
Well, hello, Max. We made it to the middle of May, and next week, May the 14th, we'll have a special back-to-grass cow-calf sale. Check out the different pairs that will be sold online. Also, on May the 15th, over 1,700 pieces of machinery will sell on the Big Iron website. Dennis Roelli from Pete's, Colorado will sell a 1997 John Deere 8400 mechanical front tractor. James Jensen from Minden, Nebraska will sell a John Deere 210G LC excavator and a John Deere 7400 self-propelled forage harvester. Craig Tuttle from Scott City, Kansas will be selling a John Deere 1770 CCS 16-row 30 planter and a 2016 year model Great Plains sweep plow. 190 different sellers will sell machinery on May the 15th. On May 16th, folks, Van Wall Equipment, John Deere dealer with locations all across Iowa, will be selling late model John Deere mowers, round balers, self-propelled sprayers, four-wheel drive tractors, quad track tractors, mechanical front tractors. Don't miss this outstanding offering, all selling with no reserve on May 16th. And Max, right around the corner, May 20th and 21st, is the Sullivan Collector Car 2-day sale. Unbelievable selection of vehicles selling. Go to bigiron.com and sullivanauctioneers.com for more information.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Pioneer, developing new generations of seed innovations for new generations of farmers. Pioneer, what's next happens here. Well, now it's time to meet that next generation of agriculturalists, and joining us this week is Logan Mason. She's serving as the Colorado State FFA Secretary. And Logan, thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
What was it that got you involved or interested in FFA back at the very beginning?
Yeah, so my family ranches cattle down in southeastern Colorado. Agriculture has kind of always been a part of my life. And when I got into high school, it just made sense to join FFA. I wanted to learn more about the industry that my family was working within, and I wanted to also try out some new competitive events, just try out a new club in high school. It was a very casual thing. So it's crazy to see where I'm at now and see what it led me to.
What were some of those competitive events that you really enjoyed as an FFA member?
My favorites of all time were definitely extemporaneous public speaking, where you get 30 minutes to write and deliver a speech on an agricultural topic. And then also agricultural sales was one of my favorites, where you receive a product, you do research, and then you sell that product to the judges.
That is a great experience for a life in agriculture. Then, of course, you've continued serving, now serving as state secretary. Logan, what have been some of the highlights so far as state secretary?
Yeah, this year has been amazing. It's definitely a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Some of my favorite highlights have been just being with my team. We all live in Denver together, so that's been great, just spending some time with them and getting to know my new best friends. And then also getting to travel around the state and interact with our members has been great, whether it's at freshman leadership conferences, state fair, stock show, chapter visits, and everything in between. We just have some really amazing members, and getting to meet them and interact with them has been phenomenal.
That's excellent. And long term, do you hope to have a career in the ag industry?
Yes, so I hope to go to Sam Houston State University next fall, and I'm going to study animal science with a pre-vet focus. I want to be a mixed animal veterinarian, so I can help livestock producers and everyone else as well.
We certainly need more mixed animal veterinarians out there, particularly in rural areas. Logan, we wish you the best of luck going forward.
Thank you so much.
Colby Ag Tech is brought to you by Copperhead Ag Products. Visit copperheadag.com for more information. Chad Colby is as giddy as a kid on Christmas Eve because there's going to be a new release from Apple here shortly. And this week he brings us what's coming from a technological perspective.
I've been waiting for it quite a while, and it's finally here. Apple this past week unveiled their latest models of iPad, and there's some big news. When you look at the model lineup, it starts on the right-hand side with the iPad mini. Really nothing has changed there. That's kind of a size issue with that device. You move up to that standard iPad. They lowered the price a little bit. When you get to the Air, they did make some enhancements to the Air. Certainly has more performance. It's got that new camera. It's a nice device. If you have one, probably don't need to upgrade. But when you go to the iPad Pro, it's a game changer. Certainly, you're going to notice it right away in appearance. It's got the thinnest chassis they've ever made in anything. Battery life's about the same. They've got some, obviously, different colors for it. Certainly, it's got all the cameras and all those normal features, but there's some significant hardware changes. The first being they've changed the forward-facing camera to the center, which is great. And then the two biggest, I think the biggest is the M4 processor by far. It's twice as fast as the old model, 4 times faster than the first edition of that, which I have now. But when you go to the OLED screen, which is essentially 2 screens on top of each other, that's a game changer. Brighter than anything we've ever had before in an iPad. And in an ag setting, that's a big deal. And with the added performance, there's some new accessories as well. You can see the keyboard here at the top has got the new function row of buttons, which is great. It's got a new sensor on the trackpad, which I'm guessing is more like the laptops in terms of feel. And if you use the Apple Pencil, they've got a completely redesigned pencil, which is pretty interesting. It's got some feedback. It also has some other functionality as well. But to me, when you put this iPad in a work setting, like in a cab right here, I think that's the big change. With that new display and new processor, now's the time if you're looking to do an upgrade for an iPad Pro. They're available now, and they're delivering next week. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thanks, Chad, for that update. And folks, stick around. We'll be talking about how the national sorghum producers are growing demand when This Week in Agribusiness returns. In recent years, American sorghum has found big buyers over in Asia. But of course, any commodity grower knows you always need more buyers. To that end, Craig Meeker and the national sorghum producers recently took a trip to India to highlight the advantages of the American sorghum into that model. I caught up with Craig and he filled us in.
It was January. I had the opportunity to make a trip for a trade mission to India. We were in multiple cities over about a 9-day period of time, interacting with multiple end users and government officials as well, but predominantly end users. Starch industry, the ethanol industry, the feed industry for livestock, and then also the human consumption industry. Sorghum is a human consumed product for sure in India, and we were there talking about what United States sorghum could do in India.
And as I think about that India, it's a big population. Craig, is there opportunity for American sorghum into that country?
Absolutely. 1.4 billion people was a shock to me. I come from I live on the farm, but the closest community I live next to is about 40 people. So 1.4 billion people's real. It is a great opportunity for United States sorghum. We are a non-GMO crop that goes right in with what India is pushing. They're non-GM, and we would love to be a part of that opportunity there in India.
As you were talking to the Indian end users, what's kept them from trying American sorghum so far? Have they just not had a chance to experience it?
I think there are multiple issues. One, of course, is some political issues that we have, trade barriers with tariffs and so on and so forth. So we're working in that avenue as well, but also misconceptions about what the U.S. sorghum is. United States sorghum does not have tannins in it. Most of the sorghum across the world elsewhere has tannins in it, so it creates a bitter taste, and a lot of it is to keep birds from consuming it in the field. The United States sorghum crop does not have any tannins in it. So that was something that they were really excited to hear about, and how they could incorporate that into their feed rations and into their ethanol blends and so on and so forth, because it works better.
Thanks, Craig, for that update, and it just goes to show what a great reminder it is that American farmers are producing solutions for end users around the world, but it's up to us sometimes to tell them that we have those solutions so we can drive those sales. Always great to see. Folks, we'll continue highlighting the changes in agriculture on the show. Be sure to join us next time right here for This Week in Agribusiness.
This Week in Agribusiness has been brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by 22 Creative Group and has been a presentation of Farm Progress Broadcast. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.